Today is April 4th. Welcome to Big Book Daily. My name is Rob. I am an alcoholic. It's a thrill, honor, and joy to be here with you today as we journey through the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. Today we are beginning part 2 of the personal stories. They stopped in time because remember, the personal stories are divided into 3 sections. Well, now we're on part 2. So we are done with the pioneers and we're moving on to those that stopped in time. And we'll talk about that intro section, and we'll read the very beginning of the first story, The Missing Link, pages 276 through 281 today. Some short reading in the Big Book today. And out of the 12 and 12, we're going to continue our journey through step 11 by reading page 103. So with all that, I hope you all are doing well today. Life is good over here. I'm drinking coffee out of my new Legoland cup. Quick side note, the family and I, we went to Legoland in Florida not too long ago, and I'll tell you, I had a ball. It was awesome. I might have even enjoyed it even more than the kids. So definitely want to go back one day. Anyways, enough of my rambling. Let's get right to the good stuff. All right, my friends. So if you recall from yesterday's reading out of the Big Book, we just finished off with such a beautiful story and such a beautiful way to end the pioneer section of the personal stories. And I'd like to just read these last 2 lines again, if you don't mind. So it says, this poor woman, she'd been through the ringer, just like everybody in the Pioneers of AA's stories have been. But she has a beautiful ending here. And she says, I have had my share of problems, heartaches, and disappointments because that's life. But I've also known a great deal of joy and a peace that is the handmaiden of an inner freedom. And then skipping on down, now there's a sense of belonging, of being wanted and needed and loved. In return for a bottle and a hangover, we have been given the keys of the kingdom. And I just think that is a beautiful way to describe sobriety. And we can have a little piece of heaven right here on earth. And she doesn't sugarcoat it. Life is still hard, but she feels like she can tackle it now. My take on that is maybe she has a family in the fellowship that she can rely on. She has the 12 steps that can help her to be honest. And she has a strong relationship with her higher power that can get her through it. I love that. So now we are moving on to part 2. So on page 279, we get a little introduction of this section. They stopped in time. So I'll go ahead and read that first, and then we'll begin our very first story. Page 279. They stopped in time. Among today's incoming AA members, many have never reached the advanced stages of alcoholism, though given time, they all might have. Most of these fortunate ones have had little or no acquaintance with delirium, with hospitals, asylums, and jails. Some are drinking heavily, and there have been occasional serious episodes, but with many, drinking had been little more than sometimes an uncontrollable nuisance. Seldom had any of these lost either health, business, family, or friends. Why do men and women like these join AA? The 17 who now tell their experiences answered that question. They saw that they had become actual or potential alcoholics, even though no serious harm had yet been done. They realized that repeated lack of drinking control, when they really wanted control, was the fatal symptom that spelled problem drinking. This, plus mounting emotional disturbances, convinced them that compulsive alcoholism already had them. That complete ruin would be only a question of time. Seeing this danger, they came to AA. They realized that in the end, alcoholism could be as mortal as cancer. Certainly no sane man would wait for malignant growth to become fatal before seeking help. Therefore, these 17 AAs and hundreds of thousands like them have been saved years of infinite suffering. They sum it up with something like this. We didn't wait to hit bottom because, thank God, we could see the bottom. Actually, the bottom came up and hit us. That sold us on Alcoholics Anonymous. All right. We will come back to that in a second. Let's jump into the very first story in this new section, part 2 here. This is the missing link. We're going to read 281 to the top of 282. Personal story number 1, the missing link. He looked at everything as the cause of his unhappiness, except alcohol. When I was 8 or 9 years old, life suddenly became very difficult. Feelings began to emerge that I didn't understand. Depression crept into my life as I started to feel alone, even in crowded rooms. In fact, life didn't make much sense to me at all. It's hard to say what sparked all of this, to pinpoint one fact or event that changed everything forever. The fact of the matter was, I was miserable from early on in my life. It was all very confusing. I remember isolating on the playground, watching all the other children laughing and playing and smiling and not feeling like I could relate at all. I felt different. I didn't feel as if I was one of them. Somehow I thought I didn't fit in. My school marks soon reflected these feelings. My behavior and attitude seemed to become troublesome to everyone around me. I soon began spending more time in the principal's office than in the classroom. My parents, perplexed by such an unhappy son, began having difficulties. My house was soon filled with the sounds of arguments and yelling about how to handle me. I found that running away from home could supply me with some sort of temporary solace, till, of course, the police would find me and bring me back to my house and my worried parents. All right, we will stop there today. I told you it was a short reading in the big book, but we'll definitely be coming back to this in just a minute. All right, so if you recall out of the 12 and 12, we have been making our journey through step 11, which has been great stuff. But the step says, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for the knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. And we spent a great deal of this chapter talking about meditation first. And then yesterday we began talking about prayer and seeking His will and knowing what His will is for our lives. So I'll start on the bottom of page 102 and we will read 103 today. Bottom of 102. As the day goes on, we can pause where situations be met and decisions made and renew the simple request, Thy will, not mine, be done. If at these points our emotional disturbances happen to be great, we will more surely keep our balance, provided we remember and repeat to ourselves a particular prayer or phrase that has been appealed to us in our reading or meditation. Just saying it over and over again will often enable us to clear a channel choked up with anger, fear, frustration, or misunderstanding, and permit us to return to the surest help of all, our search for God's will, not our own, in the moment of stress. At these critical moments, if we remind ourselves that it is better to comfort than to be comforted, to understand than to be understood, to love than to be loved, we will be following the intent of step 11. Of course, it's reasonable and understandable that the question is often asked, why can't we take specific and troubling dilemmas straight to God, and in prayer secure from Him sure and definite answers to our requests? This can be done, but it has hazards. We have seen AAs ask with much earnestness and faith for God's explicit guidance on matters ranging all the way from a shattering domestic or financial crisis to correcting a minor personal fault like tardiness. Quite often, however, the thoughts that seem to come from God are not answers at all. They prove to be well-intentioned, unconscious rationalizations. The AA, or indeed any man, who tries to run his life rigidly by this kind of prayer, by this self-serving demand of God for replies, is a particularly disconcerting individual. To any questioning or criticism of his actions, he instantly proffers his reliance upon prayer for guidance in all matters, great or small. He may have forgotten the possibility that his own wishful thinking and human tendency to rationalize have distorted his so-called guidance. All right, we will stop there today, my friends. So, while this is fresh, Thy will be done. Help me to accept whatever your will is. Again, the breakdown of the St. Francis prayer. To comfort rather than to be comforted. A lot of times when we are helping others, the very thing we were looking for happens to happen to us. as a byproduct of serving others and loving others unconditionally. It's one of those things that I don't have to overcomplicate. I just keep trying. Some of the prayers in the big book, the 3rd-step prayer, the 7th-step prayer, the sick man's prayer, they've all helped me. And when I break down those prayers word for word and really think about what each word means and how that fits into my life, it does take on a new meaning and a new perspective and renews my faith. And the one I've been thinking of lately is the prayer, I believe it's on page 86 of the big book. It's when beginning our day, before we make plans, we ask God to direct our thinking, that it be divorced from self-pity, dishonest, and self-seeking motives. And I really thought about that. Divorced from self-pity. Am I getting pouty? Am I feeling bad for myself? And then the next word, dishonest. Am I telling somebody a lie? Am I hiding things? I start breaking that down in my life. Or am I being self-seeking in some way? Instead of hanging out with my family, instead of serving them, do I just want to do what I want to do all the time? Or today? Just breaking down those 3 words, I've really meditated on those lately and thought, oh, okay. Ooh, there's an area I need to work on. God, please forgive me. How can I be better today? And again, it's with the desire to serve and to carry out His will for my life. And when I do, I feel better. Go figure. All right, so enough of my railing with the 12 and 12. Going back to the big book real fast. I love the introduction of our new set of stories here. I guess in my life, I'm probably one of them. I've never served jail time. I've never had to go necessarily to a rehab center or anything like that. My wife and children didn't leave. But let me really stress this, my friends. I know I'm an alcoholic. And if I continue to drink, all that stuff is in my future. Jail, institutions, possibly even death. And the reason I know this is because I think about alcohol the way every person in those personal stories, the pioneers of AA, who did serve jail time, who did spend time in the asylums because they didn't have rehab then, I think about alcohol just like they do. I think about alcohol just like a lot of my friends in the fellowships do, who have hit those bottom moments. So I know that if I even flirt with the idea of having a drink, all bets are off. I think sometimes my own mind, and maybe I'm not alone in this, in weak spiritual moments, I may say to myself, Rob, you're not an alcoholic, you're just depressed. I mean, you didn't serve any jail time. You didn't get any DUIs, although I very well could have. You didn't do these things. You didn't do that one. When I start doing that, I'm in trouble. Because my mind is rationalizing and minimizing the pain that I felt. Instead, it's looking for the differences instead of the similarities of my malady versus anybody else's. And I've caught myself thinking that from time to time. But then I just think, well, okay, do you obsess over alcohol, Rob? Okay, I gotta check yes in that box. Do you try to stop and you can't? Well, I check yes in that box. So, long story short, even though the circumstances might be slightly different in my life, I am an alcoholic. And if I mess with any of that stuff, even flirting with the idea of having another drink, I could easily lose everything. And the nice thing is, sobriety's so much better anyway. So much better. And I'm so grateful these stories are in here because I'm sure there's a lot of people like that maybe, again, didn't serve jail time, maybe didn't lose their family or their home, or didn't have to go to a rehab or multiple rehabs, but they're still alcoholics. And they could very well go down that road. These 12 steps and the fellowship, they're just a better way of life and a great recipe to be a better person. So, I think even for people that are non-alcoholics, this program could certainly benefit so many others. But again, I'm just grateful to be sober today. And I'm grateful you're here in this lifeboat of recovery with me. Again, as I try to say in every episode, I do not speak on behalf of AA, NA, Al-Anon, any other sect or denomination. I am just a guy, and clearly I am not a professional narrator. I am just a guy in recovery that loves these two books. I am so grateful that you're here. If you're sober today, that's a win. And I'm sure your family is very proud of you. Hope you have a great one, and I look forward to seeing you back here tomorrow.